The PlayStation Vita is a console that I myself and many others are quite unfamiliar with, as I have never actually owned one and I've certainly not played one single game from it. Not only was it an unpopular handheld back in the day, but it is really difficult to find one nowadays. Trying to find one now is like trying to find a functioning Twitter user. Trust me, I worked at a video game museum and even they don't have anything related to the PlayStation Vita as far as I know. I haven't been there recently. I may probably have slapped too hard on that table flip game, but that has recently changed. One interesting development in emulation is the Vita 3K emulator, which although is still in its development stages, looks to be a really great potential PS Vita emulator. I wanted to dive in and play some games, although if I actually had any. Luckily, I have a friend, let's just call him that, who collects Japanese Vita games, mostly via Comic-Con, and is kind enough to dump them on my computer. Of course, within the law. Copyright be damned. But yeah, kids, don't steal a car. Always dump legally owned game yourself, otherwise Sony will send a personal hitman after you, goddamn. Now, just around the same time, I was following a reverse engineering course at my university, where I rekindled an old habit of mine of trying to dig through game files like the Wii, GameCube, and other consoles and Unity games, and exploring how they worked, and also how malware and viruses worked on computers, although not always with the right precautions. I wasn't particularly that safe when it came to school property. For those wondering what I'm currently yapping about, reverse engineering is basically when you take a compiled piece of software that was already built, which at a glance looks like digital fucking vomit. When analyzed with the right tools like Ghidra and Binary Ninja or other such software, devs or developers are able to analyze and understand how the source code might work, of course, at least to some degree. It's not always as readable or exactly the same as how it was programmed. It's an approximation, but it's the best you can have right now without the source code. It's kind of like being a software detective. Instead of solving murders like a police officer with minimal results,
we would have come earlier, but your husband wasn't dead then.
You're instead trying to figure out how a system works and how to exploit it with minimal results. And when I mean exploit as in hacking cybersecurity, because this course was all in on that. I learned a lot about binary exploitation, hacking different pieces of software, and I even participated in a few CTF challenges. Although, to be real, the only challenges I could really solve were OSINT challenges, which is basically doxing, I'm not gonna lie. If you want to know more about OSINT, watch Bellingcat. It's a really great organization. But of course, it was a really fun course. Now, one day after class, I saw this post on Reddit.
Is there an English translation of Umaru-chan's Himouto Ikusei Keikaku yet?
I was baffled. A game this old has not yet had a recent translation into English? How? I mean, other games were already translated at that time. I mean, some were even made by the same developers. But yeah, there's unfortunately no English translation of this game. But then I thought, why don't I try it myself? My naive ass speaking here. But that is exactly what we'll be talking about in this video. We're going to decompile this game. I'll show you the tools, the process, and later I'll show you how you can help me with the translation effort. As to be kind of personal, I can't really properly read kanji or hiragana, so it would really help if I had someone who could speak Japanese, but I'll come back to that later. But first, a history lesson here. Before we actually dive into the technical details, let's talk about the Himouto Umaru-chan game. This game is based on the popular Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Sankaku Head. The manga first appeared as 2 one-shots in the Shueisha Miracle Jump in 2012. Has it really been that long, Christ? For reference, I was still in elementary school, before being serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump from March 2013 to November 2017. The story revolves around Umaru Doma, a high school girl who appears great in public but transforms into a lazy goblin, who is also annoying, really insecure, a junk food devourer, and an obsessed otaku and video game addict. Being called a Himouto by her older overworked brothers, Taihei. Himouto is a portmanteau of Himono Ona, meaning dried fish woman, and Imoto being little sister. So basically, a dried up little sister. Now, there are a number of other characters we could discuss, but I don't really have the time right now. We need to get to the juices. The anime was produced by Doga Kobo, which aired from July to September of 2015. 10 years ago, Christ, man. I could make a 9 years joke, but I'm already a bit late for that. But apparently, due to the popularity of the anime in Japan, it got a PlayStation Vita game called Umaru-chan Himouto Ikusei Keikaku, basically translating to Umaru's training plan, which from what I've been told is a live/visual novel/ Tomodachi game which was developed by and published by Furyu and released on December 3rd, 2015. The game itself is very simple. It's a very simple Tomodachi visual novel game, which although is not entirely awful, I can see that for a lot of players outside of Japan who are probably coked up on all the Call of Duty slop would find this as engaging as watching paint dry. And because the market here in the West isn't really up for that kind of game, so it never really got an international release. So for the longest time, the game didn't have an English translation. But then again, the anime was at least popular enough for the 2 seasons to get a dub, although the 2nd season got a little bit delayed. You can learn more about that through Hal Cozy's videos. They're really great. But not for long, my guys, which is where the decompilation comes into play. The moment you've all been waiting for. How are we going to get this game out of the files of this game? So now here comes the decompilation part. Basically the debaking of the cake. We're gonna demake the game and we're supposed to get all the data from the game itself. Now my friend dumped the game using a package file and then a work bin file. The package file is where the game is stored and the work bin basically works as a decryption key, which you can then use in an emulator like Vita 3K. The emulator specifically asks for it as to avoid piracy. Don't ask how you can dump the Vita game, that's outside of the scope of this video. There are a number of videos and tutorials that can help you with this, and my friend said he used the No NPDRM plugin, but I have no experience with that. For now, all I care about is decompiling the game. After that, we can extract and decrypt the game through the Vita 3K emulator. Now, side note, the Vita 3K uses their own PSVPVS parser to extract the game files from the package file. But now we have this directory of game files. It's not tangible data yet. At least the OP and ED are viewable, but from what we can see, there are bin files and BSB files, and I think they work together. Bin is the actual data, while BSB is the metadata file, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. So for now, I didn't really knew what these were supposed to represent, so after a bit of Googling, I found a website that discusses another game, which is called Occultic 9, which has also gotten an anime and a visual novel game, which had the same kind of file structure. And they both are connected. Bin is the file with all the data, and the BSB is basically the metadata. Now, what's interesting is that in one of the comments, the guy says he decompiled them using the Freemode toolkit. Now, this looked interesting. So, I took a look, and there it was. The holy grail of this operation. Alright, now for the fun stuff. But I want to quickly explain this part so that the video won't be an hour long and that editing this video won't take forever. So, Freemode is a collection of tools that are absolutely essential for this project. Made by Ulysses Wu. It specializes in decompiling and recompiling games made with M2's Kaleido ADV workshop engine. So, if a game is built with it, Freemode can usually crack it open and let you edit files and then rebuild them right back, where you can change parts of the game. This is great, and that's exactly what we need for this project. Now, I need to talk about one thing before we move on, and that is the BSB format. Originally only meant for PlayStation 3 files, BSB is an acronym for M2's Package Struct Binary. It's said that the format is similar to the structure of that of an MDF file, which is a media descriptor file, which acts as a disk or image file where you can store a bunch of data, like for instance images, audio, and of course, text files. Now, most of these file formats are proprietary and thus have no public documentation whatsoever, but there have been some that tried to document it. Like on this repo about the implementation of the BSB file format, which is where Freemode is based off of. And this one, which explains the format itself. As stated in the GitLab article made by Yukai Lee, PSB is a binary serialization format with an object representation similar to that of JSON, where, of course, metadata is stored from audio, images, and also text, which could also be stored as a JSON file. Which is great for us because then it's in a readable format, and then we can then easily reconvert it back to a bin/BSB file structure. That would make the game files easily replaceable. This is what makes the whole translation process possible. Freemode can convert these edited JSON files and recompile them back into a functional BSB and bin file. This is great! Also, they seem to use some sort of FastLZ or LZ77 compression, type of compression algorithm, to store these files, which is why file sizes can be small for these games. I could go on about the technical details of Freemode, but then we would be here forever, so I would highly recommend you read the wiki and articles yourself on the GitHub page. Now let's talk about the tools and, oh yeah, like and subscribe! So, we have BSB Decompile and BSB Build. These are the only ones we need, you can forget the rest. Looking at the documentation, I began to see how we could extract the game files from each bin file. You take info BSB, then the BSB file related to that bin file you want to decompile, and then you get your game files. But then, I need a key? Huh? Now, I got stuck here for the longest time, but here's the gist. The key is stored in the eboot bin of the game in plain text and can be found above a string called script_body bin, like in this example. But when I opened and inspected the file, it was a secured ELF file, which means it's encrypted. So I couldn't read, filter, or do jack shit. So how was I gonna find the key? Well, luckily for us, Vita 3K has a debug menu that allows you to dump ELF files while the game is running. Maybe, just maybe, if during runtime the game actually needs to decompress those ELF files, we could see the ELF file in plain text. And after running it and looking into the ELF dumps folder, using HXD and Ghidra, I found the key, and now we can finally extract the files. And this is the full command. -A is to extract everything, by the way. Also, originally I thought the script file had all the text files, but it's actually scenario. Script is just a bunch of unrecognizable scripting files, which maybe they're part of the squirrel language, I don't know. Somebody else should take a look at that, because I certainly haven't found anything useful from them. But there was all the text in its JSON glory. And seeing the Japanese text, I immediately began editing the tutorial text. After rebuilding the bin and BSB file using BSBuild, this is the result in the game. Just fantastic. Now, also to keep note of is that the text in the game uses some sort of markdown language to create, for example, new line characters or enters and other special effects in the text. So be careful when you're editing this, that you're making and learning to make good use of this markdown language. Speaking of! Now this is the part where you come in. If you're interested in game translation, reverse engineering, or just want to contribute to a cool community project, I'm looking for help to translate these games. Now thanks to Julius, the groundwork for accessing the text is already done. But now the actual translation needs to be done. And as I've said, I'm not that great at Japanese, so I would like to have community members help me with translating this game, because there is certainly a market for it. If you have experience in reading Japanese and want to bring these games to a wider audience, please reach out to me. I really want to see this visual novel being accessible to English-speaking fans. That is why in the description you can find a link to the Discord server where you can send me a request to access the private GitHub repo where we can work on the translation of this game. I know it's not the greatest, but it is the best way to keep this from prying eyes, as I'm not really sure what these Japanese companies are capable of, and they're certainly willing to use copyright against us. We could release the patch at some point later in life, but I haven't really planned that far ahead. We could discuss that in the Discord server. But for now, this is the way we can translate the game to its completion. But as I said, any game that uses M2's Kaleido ADV workshop is capable of being decompiled, including that Occultic 9 game, which I talked about earlier, which also doesn't have an English translation. Now remember, some of these games have not been translated. Some are, but a huge section isn't. So go on and try these as well. Just look in the PS4 developer wiki. I'll leave a link in the description. I failed to mention that not only can we extract text, but also video and audio and images, and we can edit those, which means you can basically, although it's very limited, mod this game. So I did, and I experimented with it a little bit. And this is the result. So please, go crazy with these games. Make them completely unrecognizable from the original product. So, if you want to translate other games that haven't been translated before, now is the time, because a lot of games use this engine. Just check the PS Devs wiki on this, look if the game has an English translation. If not, go crazy and use the steps in this video to decompile those games and repackage them with newly translated text. Of course, don't do piracy. And that's all I really have to say for this video, and thanks for watching. I hope you really liked this video. Subscribe if you made it this far. I will now be returning to my goon cave for another 2 years. Goodbye!